I also wanted to just touch briefly on a story that is gaining a little bit of momentum over the last few days, and that's injuries, and particularly hamstring injuries. And whilst I'm not going to, I'm not obviously medically qualified, so I'm not going to offer any theories about some of the hamstring injuries that we've seen recently. But I just thought it was worth noting, just done a bit of research over the course of this morning. And yes, there's no doubt our hamstring injuries have peaked a little over the last few weeks, but we don't know whether that's going to continue or whether we'll see that normalise as we get further into the season. So it's probably too early to draw any conclusions, and there are people far more qualified than me to draw those conclusions. But again, just to put a little bit of balance in into what's happening at the moment, I thought it was worth noting that from what we can find in the scientifically published literature around other leagues and their injury reports, hamstring strains and injuries are reported to be in the top 3 injuries of participants in field-based team sports. And that ranges anywhere from between 8% and 24% of all injuries. So looking at some of the other sports specifically, again based on what's publicly available, in the AFL, hamstring injuries are the highest injury of all injuries. In the English Premier League is the same. And in the NFL in the United States, hamstrings are the second highest injury burden. So this is where players miss games, of course. Concussion is the first for the NFL. And in the English Rugby Union, it's the RFU, it's again the second highest injury burden. So in all sorts of contact sports where players play at a very high velocity for periods of time during matches, hamstring injuries will happen. And it's also, again, data has shown that in 1/3 of hamstring injuries, there will be a recurrence of that injury within 12 months. Now, that doesn't mean everyone who gets a hamstring injury is going to have a second hamstring injury within 12 months, but 1/3 of those players who do suffer a hamstring injury will see a recurrence in the following 12 months. So again, I'm not drawing any conclusions about that. I'm not putting any theories forward. Again, just trying to put some balance into it, that these are fairly common injuries in all similar sports to ours, and not unusual. Any questions on that at all?
I'm sure there are a few coaches starting to panic. Is NRL head office worried at all that we're seeing so many players go down, especially such high-profile players? Yeah,
there's no doubt there's been a peak in those sort of injuries over the last few weeks, and some very high-profile ones as well. So, of course, we want to see our players on the field, but it's not an injury that can be controlled. Once a player's fit to go back on the field, they are fit to go back on the field. They're passed by their medical staff, and everyone crosses their fingers and hopes that there are no reoccurrence of those injuries. And of course, even with players that haven't suffered hamstring injuries before can suffer hamstring injuries. It's an injury that does occur in sports like ours. So we're not obviously panicking about it. As I said, it could normalise as we get further into the season. We've seen a spate of them over the last few weeks. Numbers are higher this year than they have been in previous years, but hopefully that will start to drop off over the coming months, and we'll get back to some sort of normal level. But it's we do need to keep it in context, in that these injuries do occur in our game and in other games as well.
Do you think the speed of the game, like given there's been rule changes to speed up the game, and I'm sure the last thing you want to do is slow down the game, but do you think that's contributing to players have to be fitter and putting their bodies on the line a bit more?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the players are as fit now as they've ever been, and the quality of football is just outstanding. So our ball in play time is pretty consistent year on year. The speed of the game is fairly consistent year on year. Now, we're not seeing huge spikes in those sorts of numbers. So the conditions in which players are playing are relatively similar. I've seen theories about it could be the wet weather and the fields are not quite as solid. And I'm not going to speculate on any of that. I don't know, and I have no data that would support anything. And others are far more qualified than me to talk about that, what might cause those sorts of injuries. But generally, these things just occur, and they can't be foreseen. And when they do occur, they take some time to get over.
would the NRL look to do sort of some of that research into why there has been an increase?
Yeah. Well, one thing we do is we record and collate all injury data from clubs that results in players missing games. You know, we don't record every single minor injury that doesn't result in lost game time, but if anything does result in a player either not completing a game or missing subsequent games, we record all that data. We provide a consolidated injury report to clubs twice a year. So that they can examine that and they can look at their own practices and see where they stand in relation to the averages across the competition. But we do also have a medical advisory subcommittee of the board, player safety subcommittee. We also have a medical advisory panel which is made up of doctors, eminent sports physicians and occupational physicians who oversee our medical practices within the game. So of course they're always looking at anything that relates to player safety, whether it be you know, the issue of head injuries or whether it be any other injuries. So you know, head injuries has been the primary focus of everyone over recent years, particularly publicly. But our medical advisors do look at all sorts of injuries and they try and look for reasons and provide feedback to clubs so they can adapt their own processes.